Now we do have Okay, hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. I am so sorry. We had a slight technical problem. We had no sound. For all those lip readers out there, I know you were just fine, but now we do have sound. Sorry for the little technical glitch. Don't worry, you didn't miss too much. Only that Iran is talking about sending warships to the Panama Canal. That's right. The Iranian regime, the Iranian military is looking to enter the Pacific Ocean for the first time. How's that for a way to start the live stream and a way to introduce you to some sound here on the live stream? We're going to talk about it today, folks. Iran in the Western Hemisphere, in Latin America, in that crucial transit trade route, the Panama Canal at America's doorstep, it may very well happen. We're going to talk about that. Also, red lines. Benjamin Netanyahu, the brand new, shouldn't really say brand new, right? This is his third time at the helm as Israel's leader. Nevertheless, he was sworn in about 2 weeks ago, about 12 days ago, actually. And he's already laying down red lines, his words, red lines to Iran and Hezbollah when it comes to Syria and Lebanon. Think about that great northern war, that coming great northern war that we've talked about frequently here in the newscast. Well, BBC's what is coming, and he's laying down those red lines as we speak. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to read you some of his direct quotes from a very revealing statement that he released yesterday after touring a military base in northern Israel near the Lebanon and Syria borders. Speaking of Iran and Syria, we also have reports that the Iranian regime is bolstering its air defenses in Syria to defend against Israeli airstrikes. Now, folks, why would Iran choose this moment in time to build up its air defenses in Syria? Could it be that they know, and he just talked about red lines yesterday, right? They know that Benjamin Netanyahu is going to increase Israeli military activity, Israeli airstrikes in particular, in Syria. Remember, Bibi was the one back in 2011 who began all of this. He crafted Israel's so-called, I guess you would call it their Syria doctrine. He crafted that during his last time as prime minister. Remember, between 2009 and 2021, Bibi was also prime minister. He crafted that policy, that strategy, and that led to, during his last tenure as PM, Israel carrying out hundreds of airstrikes against Iran and Hezbollah in Syria. So Iran knows very well what Bibi's all about when it comes to Syria and the Iranian presence there and the Iranian obsession with entrenching itself in Syria at Israel's doorstep and transiting advanced weapons, in particular those precision-guided missiles, PGMs for short, transiting them through Syria into the hands of Hezbollah in Lebanon. Just added a little brightness there on the laptop, folks. Okay, we've got sound, we've got color. Okay, we're ready to roll here. But before we go any further, just want to give a shout out to everyone watching right now. Before we are done, we'll have thousands of people watching from around the world, which is always a thrill. Someone says Syria is not Iran. Kamal says that, one of our commenters. Kamal, I know, but Iran believes that Syria is now part of Iran. They essentially, does the Iranian regime, they see Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen as basically greater Iran. And you can say in many ways those four Arab countries are controlled by Persian Iran. And that's the situation. So Syria is not Iran. Amen. But Iran is there to stay, at least in their view. And the Iranian regime, the Iranian military, the Revolutionary Guards Corps are entrenching themselves there. Hey, speaking of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the IRGC, last week, January 3rd, was the anniversary of the death of Qasem Soleimani, And the Iranian regime every year, third anniversary, hard to believe, right? That was January 3rd, 2020, when former President Trump ordered that strike in Iraq. Soleimani landed at Baghdad International Airport and was taken out by a U.S. drone. 3 years, again, hard to believe. That's a blow I don't believe the Iranian regime has ever recovered from. And they're still talking about it, folks. Over the past week, since the third anniversary passed, the Iranian regime is still talking about Soleimani and still breathing threats of revenge, not only against the United States, but against Israel as well. Hey, remember 2020, how it was bookended. January 2020, Soleimani eliminated. And then late November 2020, Fakhrizadeh, the godfather, I guess you would say, of Iran's nuclear program, he was eliminated. So 2020 wasn't a very good year for a lot of people, obviously, and in particular, the Iranian regime did not have a very pleasant 2020. And we also hope that the regime does not have a pleasant 2023. Certainly, they're not off to one, because thousands upon thousands of Iranians are still in the streets right now in real time as I come to you, protesting this regime. So, hey, let's see. Ashley Burton, I'm just looking off screen at the little chat bar we have going on here. Ashley Burton, welcome to Watchman membership. Ashley, we really appreciate it. Folks, if you want to become a premium member, just go to our homepage and click on join, and you will become a Watchman premium member. And you get some nice perks there, including the exclusive first look at every brand new episode of the Watchman show, which you see every week on TBN, of course, before it hits the air on TBN, before anyone else in the world, quite literally, other than myself and my editor, before we see it, you see it before it hits the air. $4.99 a month. Not only do you get that with exclusive behind-the-scenes commentary from yours truly, but you help to keep us going here, help to keep the channel alive. We can't do it without you, so we appreciate it. Okay, we've got people from Israel. We've got people praying for California. All the nasty weather there. We're praying for the people in California right now, too. And again, before we're done, we'll have every continent represented. I like to say that we maybe have some penguins watching on their mobile phones in Antarctica. Who knows? But in all seriousness, it's a lot of fun to do these live streams and have people from around the world with us. Hey, for such a time as this, right? And we just did a TBN special, actually, a town hall special, where we talked about a lot of the negative influences of being online and social media, especially among our kids. But on the flip side, we can use this for good too, right? And through this channel, the Watchman channel, the Watchman News channel on YouTube, we're able to reach people in every corner of the world, every tribe, tongue, language, race, ethnicity. And that's pretty amazing. And we're reaching them with, number one, the gospel of Jesus Christ and the truth of who Jesus is. And number two, the truth of what's happening in God's land, the land of Israel, and in the Middle East more broadly, and how it affects all of us, no matter where we live around the world. So that is a lot of fun. I see Bangladesh here, Puerto Rico, good stuff. Africa, Nigeria was just checking in, Louisiana, Wales. So just thrilled to be with y'all, and it's an honor, a privilege as we start 2023 in the right way with a good, solid live stream here with a lot of great information that we will be bringing to you. Okay, remember, we've got our Q&A here. We're going for about an hour. We will have Q&A at the end of this live stream, so send along your questions here, please. Because we're going to have an active and lively Q&A towards the end. We have someone from Milan joining. Wow, I know Milan is beautiful, and I'd love to visit Italy soon. Stay tuned on that. Hey, that TBN Town Hall I mentioned, folks, I think you might really want to check that out. And we're going to dig in a minute to Iran and the Panama Canal. Wow. But the TBN Town Hall, it was called State of the Nation 2023. Wayne, welcome to Watchman membership. That just popped up in the chat. Welcome to Watchman membership. But the town hall featuring Governor Mike Huckabee, Erick Metaxas, best-selling author, Dr. Rick Rigsby, Sheila Walsh. I strongly encourage you to check that out, folks. It's here on the homepage under U.S. News and under Israel news. And I think everyone watching, even if you're not in the United States, if you're not American, not a U.S. citizen, the program was focused mostly on what's happening in the U.S. and what to expect 2023, what to expect prophetically. But folks, we're kind of all in the same boat right here now, right? No matter where we live in the world, we are facing similar challenges. So I strongly encourage you to check that out. It's a good one. Okay, let's dig in to this news about Iran and the Panama Canal. 1 second, if I can only pull it up on my phone, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just read from this great piece from the Washington Free Beacon, which is an excellent publication. Adam Credo is, and yes, Adam wrote this piece, no surprise. He's an excellent reporter, national security reporter, and on all things Middle East. And reminder, we talked about this on yesterday's newscast, the coming collision course between the Biden administration and the new Israeli government. Ron Dermer, Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs. You've seen him here in the newscast. You've seen him on the Watchman TV show. He was just in Washington, D.C., folks. We're talking about firsts here as we start a new year. He was the first Israeli minister to visit the U.S., first Israeli minister in this new government, led once again by Benjamin Netanyahu, to visit the United States and meet with Biden administration officials. We talked yesterday about the coming collision course between Bibi and Biden. Even though they're old friends going back 40 years, they've known each other, and all that's great. But there are members of this current U.S. administration who are hostile to Israel, who are holdovers from the Obama administration, which was the most hostile administration in U.S. history when it came to Israel. And they had a particular personal animus against Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu. By the way, I'm recommending things left and right for you here, but that's why we do what we do. I interviewed the prime minister, of course, recently. Netanyahu, you saw it on the newscast, saw on TV show. If you didn't, under Israel News here on the homepage. Hey, while you're here, I assume that if you're joining us for a live stream, that you're all in on the Watchman News channel and that you are a subscriber. If you have not subscribed, hey, click the subscribe button. Great way to start 2023, and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We will be bringing you some great stuff throughout 2023. We're expanding our team, and it's getting good. It's getting really good, and things are heating up in the world's most volatile and chaotic region, the Middle East. And what happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. Events unfolding there right now, folks, will profoundly affect all of us, no matter where we live. Last recommendation before we get to Iran, Panama Canal, Netanyahu's new book, Bibi, My Story, which he wrote in longhand. He shared that with us during our interview. Folks, we're talking about hostility from the Biden administration, from the Obama administration. Wow. Bibi writes about it. He's very frank, very forthcoming in this book. I strongly encourage you to check it out. And he talks about the naked hostility from Barack Obama towards him on a personal level and towards Israel. It's really quite stunning. It's an eye-opener. You knew it was going on as it was going on, right? Their time in leadership overlapped. Obama between 2009 and early 2017. And then Bibi was in office that entire time, essentially from 2009 to 2021. So it's kind of like Bibi can't catch a break in terms of having an American counterpart who we can get along with. He did have Bill Clinton during his first tenure as prime minister, 1996 to 99. Bibi was stuck with Bill Clinton. Then Barack Obama. He had a brief moment of clarity and a moment where he could take a breath and really get things done when Donald Trump was president for 4 years. But now it's back to Joe Biden. And although they apparently have a very warm personal relationship, again, Biden is surrounded by folks who are not friends to Benjamin Netanyahu or to the agenda of this new Israeli government, which is, hey, build up communities in Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland, which is take out Iran's nuclear facilities and eliminate that as an existential threat to the Jewish state and to the world, which is potentially to change the status quo atop the Temple Mount. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been adamant he's not going to do that. But, folks, there are members of this new government who certainly are saying, hey, wait a minute. Jews cannot pray atop the Temple Mount, the holiest site in Judaism where both Jewish temples once stood? This is not right, and this cannot stand. So that's another thing, another kind of loggerheads situation between Bibi's government and the Biden administration. Folks, it's coming. Mark my words, the collision course. Will it be as openly hostile as things were with Obama? Unclear. But I'll tell you what, if the Biden administration eventually tries to, in the words of his former spokesperson, circle back and try to revive that Iran nuclear deal, things are going to get nasty. Right now, you might say, no way, that deal is dead in the water. It will never be revived. Right now, Iran, which has been a pariah, of course, the Iranian regime has never been more of a pariah, as it is killing protesters and cracking skulls in the streets. It's to the point where even the Biden administration said, oh, gosh, and Europe said, oh, gosh, we're desperate to do this deal. We really want to make peace with Iran and give them what they want and appease them so they'll leave us alone. But, man, the optics of it aren't too good right now because they're killing people in the streets, killing their own citizens. So right now we need to kind of back off and cool it on the deal for now. Folks, mark my words. If a day comes that this mini revolution in Iran, this massive uprising that's going on across the country, which you hear nary a word about in the mainstream media, surprise, surprise, if it does die down, if the Iranian regime cracks down to the extent where people kind of throw in the towel and the revolution and the protests die down, and we've seen this before over the past 23, 24 years, if that happens and things simmer down a bit, do not be shocked if the Biden administration and the likes of Britain, France, and Germany revive those talks with the mullahs and try to revive that deal. Folks, I've described this Iranian nuclear deal to like a jihadi vampire or zombie that refuses to be killed. Every time you think it's dead in the water, it's revived. And the sad part about it is it's revived by the West, by U.S. and European diplomats who come to the table, come to Iran begging, saying, please do business with us. We just want a deal at any cost. We'll give you whatever you want. Please, just don't hurt us and just don't develop nuclear weapons. And if you do develop nuclear weapons, it's tough for Israel. It's not the end of the world if you do develop the weapons, but just don't use them against us. This is the philosophy, folks. This is the philosophy of our so-called fearless leaders in Europe and the United States right now. Gosh. Well, speaking of Europe and the United States and the West and Israel, I mentioned at the top. Let's dig into it, right? Iran and the Panama Canal. Washington Free Beacon, great article by Adam Credo, and I went off a little tangent there. Now I'm getting back to it. I apologize, but important to talk about Bibi-Biden relations, no doubt. Here you go. From the Washington Free Beacon, Iran's Navy is set to station warships for the first time in the Panama Canal, a critical trade route in America's backyard that has never before seen an Iranian military presence. But Joe Biden as president, we've seen a lot of firsts in the foreign policy realm, and they're not good. And here's another one for you. Iranian Rear Admiral Shahram Irani, he's the commander of Iran's Navy, said today that his forces will establish a presence in the Panama Canal later this year, 2023, marking the first time Iran's military has entered the Pacific Ocean. The article goes on to say that Iran in recent years has placed a greater focus on moving its military into Latin American territories as it strengthens relations with anti-American dictators in the region, most notably in Venezuela. I would add Cuba to that mix as well. And there's more in Latin America. Really, these hardline Marxists are coming to power throughout the region, and that's not good. Iranian vessels have docked more frequently in Venezuela as Tehran's hardline, needless to say, hardline regime seeks to prop up Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. A national security expert quoted in this Washington Free Beacon piece says, this is what Iran has been building in Latin America for the past 30 to 40 years. Wow. And the goal of Iran, he says, has always been to have a military presence in Latin America. So this is not surprising that it's going to make moves on the Panama Canal. Nicaragua is another friend of Iran, the regime there. This national security expert here says this is a tremendous escalation if it is to happen. I agree. Did you learn, if you're an American, and we've got a lot of U.S. citizens here watching and people from all around the world, but some of my fellow Americans, quick question. Did you learn about the Monroe Doctrine in grade school? Where, look, we're not going to allow hostile powers to operate in the Western Hemisphere. It used to exist. It was never scrapped, to my knowledge. Very interesting. Last thing here, Iran's Rear Admiral Irani from Iran, very original, said the Navy presence in the Panama Canal is meant to, quote, strengthen our maritime presence in international waters. And that's that. What do you think, folks? I'd like to get your thoughts in the comments here. What do you think? Iran, Panama Canal? Hey, the Panama Canal, obviously, again, critical trade route and obviously at America's doorstep. What do you think? What do you think of Iran forging ties and alliances with these Latin American dictators who seem to be expanding, who seem to be multiplying in the Western Hemisphere, Latin America, Marxist, neo-Marxist, communist types who are uniformly anti-American and anti-Israel as well. And they're welcoming the Iranian regime with open arms. What do you think? Any questions about this Q&A? Remember, last 15 minutes or so, hit us up and leave some questions. I can tell you what I think. It ain't good. And it's a sign of the times. I mentioned again Joe Biden, obviously. And you might say, don't pile on and get political. I'm not. I am also, though, a straight shooter. And I'm telling you that the likes of Iran right now, they smell weakness in Washington, D.C., and they're emboldened. And I believe under different leadership, stronger leadership, more conservative leadership in D.C., which we don't have right now, I don't think Iran would be making noise about stationing warships in the Panama Canal. I just don't. But right now they feel emboldened. They feel empowered. And why wouldn't they? Folks, listen, at the same time that the Iranian regime is targeting U.S. troops in Syria and Iraq openly, the Iranian regime, one of its acolytes a few months ago, tried to kill the author Salman Rushdie on U.S. soil. The Iranian regime, and even the Biden administration has admitted this, has plotted to kill, murder former U.S. diplomats on U.S. soil. This is all part of the public record. And there's been no response from the Biden administration other than to negotiate with Iran and try to forge a new Iran nuclear deal. They saw what happened in Afghanistan in August 2021. That stain on America's reputation is not going away anytime soon. And Joe Biden engineered all of that. They see Russia invading Ukraine. I'm talking Iran's leaders. They see China menacing Taiwan. And they see a lot of empty bluster from D.C. and from the current administration, but not much action at all, other than to lead from behind. So I ask you, why wouldn't Iran look to sink its tentacles into Latin America and in particular the Panama Canal in the Pacific Ocean? Why not? Who's going to stop them right now? That's how they look at it right now. And it's sad to say, as a proud American, grieves me to say, it's hard to argue with their rationale. Who is going to stop them right now? Does the Biden administration have the stomach to take on the Iranian regime? I don't believe so. And that's why they want a deal badly. They just want the Iran problem to go away, because then they can focus. I'm talking about the leadership in D.C. right now at the White House. They can focus on transforming the United States and a disastrous far left domestic policy. Foreign policy for this administration is a distraction, unless it fits with their foreign policy goals, like pressuring Israel to make unilateral concessions to the Palestinians, asking nothing from the Palestinians, asking everything from Israel. I think that's a good segue. Excuse me as I wet my whistle a little bit. A lot of talking here. I think that's a good segue into the new Israeli government and these red lines that Benjamin Netanyahu, who you recently saw here on the Watchman, what a great conversation that was, right? In case you missed it, archives, check it out on the homepage. I'm pulling up direct quotes here from the prime minister and these red lines that he's talking about. From the Jerusalem Post, Netanyahu sets red lines for Iran on Israel's northern border. Again, he was just sworn in 12 days ago. He's getting right down to work when it comes to Iran. The main enemy, now Netanyahu visited Israel's north on Tuesday with Israel's new defense minister, Yoav Gallant. And he said, quote, "The main enemy we face is the terrorist regime in Iran and its entrenchment in Syria and Lebanon." He went on to say, "We are determined to fight Iran's attempts to develop a nuclear arsenal and any attempt by Iran to establish a base against us on our northern military border in Syria. We are determined," said Netanyahu, "to fight all attempts by Hezbollah to show aggression against us from Lebanon. And we will remind those who need to be reminded of our red lines in this matter." Folks, he's not messing around, and he means business. And again, he was the architect of Israel's strategy of neutralizing Iran in Syria. Now, I think it's very telling that Bibi left office briefly, it turned out, in 2021, June 2021. Naftali Bennett became prime minister, and then Yair Lapid. For about 4 months, Lapid was at the helm. Bennett for a year, Lapid for about 5 months overall. Wasn't it interesting that the policy in Syria was basically seamless, right? They continued what Bibi had started. They continued what Israeli military officials call the war between the wars, meaning the constant precision strikes against Iran and Hezbollah inside Syria. Bennett and Lapid continued that. And now Bibi, who was the architect of that, is back at the helm, so you can bet your bottom dollar he's got big plans when it comes to countering Iran and Hezbollah in Syria. No doubt. You can expect, I would think, an increase in Israeli activity in Syria, which brings us to Russia. Remember, the big elephant in the room, or I should say the bear in the room, the Russian bear in the room. Okay, Russia still has thousands of soldiers in Syria at Israel's doorstep. The way Netanyahu and his administration put it, they say, look, we share a border with Russia, not a literal geographic border, but Russia is in Syria at our border. And Russia is the most powerful force, obviously, in Syria. Russia essentially controls the airspace above Syria. Why is that important? Because for the past, about 10 years at least, Russia has permitted, and not that Israel needs anyone's permission. Israel is a sovereign nation. Let's say Russia has stood aside and looked the other way. Let's rephrase that. Russia has looked the other way as Israel has carried out strike after strike, hundreds, if not thousands, of strikes against Russia's close friends and allies, Iran and Hezbollah and the Assad regime in Syria. Russia has stood down, and Israel has largely operated freely in Syria. Could that change? I believe there's a good chance it could. Although Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin have had a very solid relationship going back some 24 years. I think they first met in 1999, shortly after Putin came to power in Russia. Bibi, during his last go-round as prime minister, visited Russia frequently and met with Vladimir Putin. The two seem to have a very good rapport, and they've come to this understanding in Syria. And that counts for a lot, folks, to have a warm, personal relationship with another leader. Naftali Bennett tried to establish that with Putin, never really got there. Lapid was highly critical of Putin and what Putin's doing in Ukraine, obviously. So they didn't have any kind of warm relationship. Bibi, is it a warm relationship? Unclear if it's warm, but it's a solid relationship. He has a good rapport, again, with Vladimir Putin. You would think that would help when it comes to Syria. And Benjamin Netanyahu, folks, is a statesman. He's a veteran statesman. He's been around the block and then some. He is a true world leader with a global stature. That is undeniable. He's got a gravitas that Lapid and Bennett certainly did not have, including in Putin's eyes. You get the sense that Putin knows that Bibi is a serious man and a serious leader. So will that help in Syria? On one hand, you would think so. But on the other hand, no matter who the Israeli prime minister is, you ever heard the term quid pro quo? We've talked about this on the newscast over the past few months. Iran is giving Russia a whole lot of help in Ukraine right now. Iran has supplied the Russian military with hundreds, if not thousands, of attack drones that it is using in Ukraine. Iran is also reportedly prepared to supply Russia with ballistic missiles. Essentially, folks, Iran is helping Russia to replenish its arsenal. Look, Russia, it was nearly 11 months ago that Russia invaded Ukraine. Its stockpiles have reportedly, its military stockpiles, missiles, drones, and the like, have reportedly been depleted to the point where they're turning to Iran and North Korea for basically not physical reinforcements in the form of troops, but to replenish their military arsenal. It's a big deal for Iran to step out there on the world stage. And basically, they tried to deny it for a while, but pretty much it's not an open secret. It's an open thing that Iran has been helping to arm Russia in Ukraine. And that's another reason that the Biden administration has had to back off from its dealings with Iran. Number one, the Iranian skull cracking against protesters right now. Number two, the rosy Iranian relationship with Russia. Again, if Biden and his administration started to negotiate with Iran under those conditions, it would be very bad optics. And they know that. Hey, if they could, folks, if it wouldn't dent their reputation, which is already not very sterling, as I discussed a minute ago, but if negotiating with Iran would not dent their reputation or cause any kind of uproar, they would do it. Despite Iran slaughtering protesters and despite Iran in bed with the Putin regime, they would do it. And that's a sad fact. But for now, they know it's toxic. It's no pun intended, radioactive to deal with the Iranian regime. So they're backing off for now, but they are going to revisit that Iran deal eventually. Last word on Putin and Russia. I mentioned quid pro quo. I just laid out how Iran is helping Russia big time. Iran is not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. They're not naturally benevolent, kind folks when it comes to the Iranian regime. Not the Iranian people who we love, who are the victims of this regime, but Ayatollah Khamenei and the various mullahs and ayatollahs and thugs at the helm of that regime, they don't do things out of the kindness of their heart unilaterally. They expect something in return from Russia. The big question, what do they expect? What do they want in return? Could it be, number one, and we've heard rumblings of this, could it be help with their nuclear program? Would Russia actually help Iran with its nuclear program? Perhaps. Secondly, and perhaps even more likely, is Iran saying to Russia, is it imploring Putin to stop Israel's activities in Syria? Is Iran saying to Russia, hey, we're giving you all this help in Ukraine. We're sticking our necks out on the line for you. You need to start sticking your necks out on the line for us a little bit and tell Israel no more. Close the airspace over Syria and do not allow Israel to operate in Syria. You got to believe that Iran has made that request of Russia, right? You have to believe. How could they not? Especially now that Iran is helping Russia so much in Ukraine. So you have to think that Iran's made that request of Russia. They would love nothing more than to see Russia tell Israel, hey, Syria's off limits, Israel. Because that would allow Iran.
Okay, I found this on the web.
Oops.
Israel. Check it out.
The wonders of modern technology. I was overheard here by my phone. I was not talking to you, phone. I was talking to thousands of our loyal Watchman viewers. But you have to think that Iran is going to make that request, and they probably have already, right? What does Vladimir Putin do? Folks, listen. A year ago, before Russia invaded Ukraine, I would say, who needs who more? Does Iran need Russia more, or does Russia need Iran more? It was a no-brainer. Iran needs Russia more. No doubt. Iran still needs Russia more. But folks, Russia needs some friends right now. Let's talk about pariah states, right? We talked about Iran being a pariah. Russia has become a pariah as well, at least the regime in Russia over the last 11 months since the Ukraine invasion went down. And Russia needs friends. And they're looking out across the world landscape. Who are their friends? They're badly in need of friends right now because there's these sanctions, of course, against Russia, but their economy still seems to largely be humming along despite the sanctions. How is that? Because Russia has cleaved more closely to its friends. And who are its friends? China, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, Belarus, etc. So Putin feels like he's in a pretty good position right now, but he's got a handful of friends and he needs them. So is he more amenable, considering that, is he more amenable to these Iranian requests to shut the skies over Syria? I think he very well may be. And we can't talk about all this without mentioning Ezekiel 38 and 39, where I believe, at least, and everyone has different interpretations. I know some folks will say, no, Turkey is going to lead the Gog-Magog invasion laid out in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And if you've never heard these words before, Ezekiel, Gog-Magog, and you say, what the heck is he talking about? We're talking about the Bible, the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. The prophet Ezekiel, inspired by God Almighty, lays out a future war that will come to the Middle East, what he calls a latter, L-A-T-T-E-R, days, confederation of nations that come against Israel. Folks, he uses ancient names in Gog, Magog, Meshach and Tubal and Gog and Magog, which aren't used today other than Persia, which is modern day Iran. He also uses Libya, specifically mentions Ethiopia. But I believe Russia will lead that invasion. along with Iran and Turkey. Turkey will be involved at the forefront along with Iran and Russia, in my view. And we've seen Russia, Turkey, Iran, the leaders of these nations meeting frequently. But I believe Russia will lead it. And I think Russia right now is well positioned to do just that as it retains a presence on the mountains of Israel in Syria. Stay tuned. And look, Vladimir Putin, I've mentioned this over the months, he may not be the one. He may not be the Russian leader in power when this Gog-Magog invasion happens. He's over 70 years old. He's either 70 or 71. There are persistent reports that he's in poor health, that he has cancer, and persistent reports that some in the upper echelon of the Russian government are not happy with the performance in Ukraine and his leadership in the Ukraine campaign. Is it beyond the realm of possibility to say that Vladimir Putin may not be the man in charge much longer? I don't think so. It's also not beyond the realm of possibility to say that Vladimir Putin could be in charge in Russia for another 15 years, 20 years, until the day he dies. We don't know. But expect the unexpected in 2023. How's that? In the Middle East and beyond, expect the unexpected in 2023. Last thing I want to mention before we get to Q&A, one more thing to mention, and it's a Syria mention, but it's an important one, I think. Let's quote from the Times of Israel here. And hey, send those questions along. I'm waiting. I will pull them up here. Okay, people have some stuff coming here. What do we have? Okay, questions are starting to come. Good. Here's some food for thought before we start the Q&A. Iran steps up air defense deployment in Syria in bid to curb Israeli strikes. An unnamed intelligence source tells Newsweek that Israel has struck at least 7 targets related to Iran's terror network in Syria over the past 2 years and killed 10 Iranians. We reported that here in the newscast, too. Here you go. Iran has invested millions of dollars in an effort to ramp up the deployment of an advanced air defense network in Syria, amid repeated attempts, the article says, by Israel to target Iranian sites and shipments of weapons to its regional proxies. According to the report, Iran has been promoting the deployment of aerial defense capabilities on its behalf in Syria at a cost of tens of millions of dollars in order to deal with the Israeli airstrikes. Wow. It's shared with the Syrian army, Iran's efforts here, and possibly even with the aim of enabling independent Iranian operation of the aerial defense systems from Syria. This is very interesting. What this is saying, essentially, is that Iran wants sovereignty in Syria. Iran, essentially, folks, wants to operate on its own in Syria and not answer to Syria. Look, Bashar al-Assad says this is a sovereign nation and you are here, Iran, as our guests. And Iran says, no, we're here as your benefactor and we're going to do what we want to do. And we're going to stay here as long as we want to stay here. And that's how Iran sees it. So now what this report is saying is that Iran wants to independently operate air defense systems inside a foreign country, Syria. Now, where are the howls of outrage from the world about this? They're non-existent. Where's the UN on this? We talk about occupation. Iranian forces are essentially occupying Syria right now, not to mention Lebanon and Yemen and Iraq and Gaza, where all their proxies live and breathe and operate with Iranian arming and funding. Where's the UN on that, man? And hey, we really live in times, and I've been reading the book of Isaiah lately to start this new year. Folks, I highly recommend it. If not for anything else, but the amount of incredible messianic prophecies that herald the coming of Jesus, Yeshua, in the book of Isaiah. But Isaiah also talks about days that are coming and He says, woe to those, actually, woe to those who call good evil and evil good. Are we not living in those days in 2023? Has there ever been a more clear example of people calling what's things that are an abomination to God, which are pure evil, calling those things good, and calling all that's good and pure and true and biblical evil? That's 2023. I'm sad to say. We're living in the days, Bible times, prophetic times. Fasten your seatbelt. And by the way, be encouraged, because God Almighty still sits on the throne. He is in control. He is for you and not against you. And he will be your buckler. He will be your shield. He will lift you up and get you through these dark days we are living in right now. Don't despair. Don't lose heart. Don't lose hope. God is there. I've talked about it before here on the newscast as we get into questions. Have you ever heard the poem Footprints? Anyone? Any of our viewers, have you ever heard of this poem, Footprints? I still have the bookmark that my mom, God rest her soul, gave me years ago. And basically, the person who's kind of narrating the poem says, God, where were you all those years when I was going through hell, quite literally? And what did Winston Churchill say? If you're going through hell, keep going. I was going through hell, the narrator says, and there were always two sets of footprints on the sand, Jesus. Your footprints and mine. You're walking together. I was walking with you in communion with you. But in those horrible times, there was only one set of footprints in the sand. God, where were you? And Jesus said, my son, during those times, there was only one set of footprints, because that's when I was carrying you through the storm. And that still applies in 2023. I love that poem. It's called Footprints. I recently ordered the poem on bookmarks for a Christmas gift for a lot of my loved ones. So it's a good one, and that should give you hope. Let's get into some questions here. Okay. The Watchman with Erick Stakelbeck asks, Kel61 asks, who do you think will be first to attack who in 2023? I guess you're talking about the nations in general, Kel61. That's a good question. I would say in the short term, Russia obviously has already attacked Ukraine, but I would say in the short term, look for Russia to ramp up its attacks in Ukraine, and look for things to get worse in Ukraine before they get better. I'm sad to say, but that's a fact. Serbia and Kosovo, there's been a lot of rumblings of potential military action there and a flare-up there. Keep an eye on that. Armenia and Azerbaijan, a lot of tension there. Of course, China, Taiwan, we've been kind of looking at that in kind of a long view. But on the other hand, you have to think that China has seen the weakness in Washington, D.C. and the current leadership and said, you know what? We were originally going to attack Taiwan in 2027, but why not take advantage now while Biden is in office and strike sooner? I hate to say that, and I hope it doesn't happen, but I'm just trying to kind of get inside the minds of Xi Jinping and the communist regime in Beijing. If you're them, you're taking the measure of the Biden administration and saying, if we move against Taiwan, what are they going to do? Russia moved against Ukraine and they paid a price, but they're still standing. So China might say, let's move sooner rather than later. I would say it might be unlikely that would happen in 2023, but it's something to keep an eye on. I hope it never happens. But the China-Taiwan situation is always something to keep an eye on. And of course, the Middle East. Hey, Israel, Iran, that could break out into a major conflict any day. And we've always got, it seems at least once per year, we've got something flaring up in Gaza, right? Hamas and Islamic Jihad, those two Iranian proxies, have been rather quiet as of late. But folks, as we know, that can change on a dime. So those are some of the potential theaters. And hey, things could break out between Israel and Hezbollah and Lebanon at any time. We could see a major Middle East war erupt this year or any year. That's not a very bold prediction for me, I have to say, because that's pretty much always the situation in the Middle East. But you got to feel with Benjamin Netanyahu back in office as well, this new Israeli government, what's going on the Temple Mount, Iran, all of it, you got to feel that the big one and a major regional war that we've talked about here in the newscast for years is getting closer in 2023 and beyond this year. Okay, good question there. What else do we have? Eleanor Barnes. Eleanor, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us as always. Says Shalom from Florida. Question: why would Iran show their drones underground as seen in some of your B-roll footage before? To intimidate Israel? Eleanor, yeah, I think so, because I think, Eleanor, I know what you're getting at. You're probably thinking, why are they showing their drones? Because Israel could maybe take those out and bomb those sites, right? I would think two things here, Eleanor and everyone. Good question, Eleanor. Number one, you got to think those drones, many times, those underground drones that Iran shows, at least inside Iran. Israel has struck Iranian drone factories in Syria several times. It seems those drone factories in Syria are not as well fortified as the ones inside Iran proper. You got to think the ones inside Iran are probably in deep underground bunkers, perhaps, which might be a little tougher to strike, obviously. But secondly, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. To intimidate Israel, but to send a message to the U.S. and to the world as well, to project strength and to project Iran's view that, hey, we are a world power. We are a budding superpower, and we are a force to be reckoned with. Just look at our drone arsenal. We are the innovator in drone technology. So, yeah, Eleanor, you hit the nail on the head to answer your question. That's what Iran is thinking. A question from my fellow Philly native, Crisco Duck. Crisco Duck, welcome back. Go Eagles. His question: Jordan unveiled a new 50 dinar banknote featuring an image of King Abdullah II with the Temple Mount compound in the background. Well, what claim does Jordan have with the Temple Mount? Great question from Crisco Duck, and we've been talking about the Temple Mount a lot here on the newscast in recent weeks. Jordan's claim, if they have a claim really, is, listen, they call themselves the custodians of the Temple Mount, meaning the Temple Mount is under Muslim control. And in specific, it's under Jordanian control. That's that status quo, that term you keep hearing, the status quo, don't change the status quo. That's the status quo that was established in 1967. Israel recaptured Jerusalem, united the holy city for the first time in nearly 2,000 years, once again, the ancient and ancestral capital of Israel and the Jewish people. But Moshe Dayan, who led that offensive in Jerusalem, instead of saying, hey, the Temple Mount is ours, he called together the Muslim authorities and he said, you guys can keep the Temple Mount and you can keep control over the holy sites. And that's exactly what happened. And the nation of Jordan, which Israel pushed out of the Temple Mount, out of Jerusalem in 1967, still retains control over the Temple Mount. How long is that going to last? I don't know. But I can tell you right now, and they obviously, and Crisco Duck laid it out, a banknote with the Temple Mount, a Jordanian banknote, they take it very seriously. And King Abdullah, we talked about this on a newscast recently, basically made what can only be called a threat, I think, to Israel, saying, hey, basically don't cross us when it comes to the Temple Mount. Or warning, maybe not a threat, but a clear warning shot across the bow. So Jordan takes that charge as custodian of the Temple Mount very seriously. But folks, I have to tell you, there's a groundswell in Israel of people who are saying, and not like far right-wing people, like not only like Itamar Ben-Gvir and people like that, who are the boogeymen of the left-wing media, but just kind of average Israelis and just kind of traditionalist Israelis, conservative Israelis, not even Israelis who are particularly religious, are saying, wait a minute, why can't we pray on the Temple Mount? This status quo doesn't make much sense. This is our holiest site. We prayed there 3,000 years ago. Why can't I go atop the Temple Mount and say a prayer openly? Because if Jews do that, folks, under the current circumstances, if Jews do that, they are either escorted off the mount right away or they're arrested. Could you imagine? If you're a Jew or a Christian, by the way, who prays atop the Temple Mount openly, you're out of there. You're canceled. You're banned. And the Jewish people are saying, wait a minute, that's not right. Yet we have footage here in the newscast that we've showed of thousands of Muslims praying on the Temple Mount and large prayer gatherings during Friday prayers. They stream out of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They march to the Temple Mount and they pray in large numbers. Why can't Jews and Christians also pray atop the Temple Mount? They're not hurting anyone to pray. You know, Isaiah, there he is again. He says, a day is coming. God says, my house will be a house of prayer for all nations. And then you're getting into the third temple. And also a groundswell there among many Israelis. Folks, we live in prophetic times. I got news for you. Again, fasten your seatbelts. The Temple Mount will increasingly be at the center of the world's attention. Israel is the center of the world, quite literally, geographically. Jerusalem is the center of that center. And it's not a coincidence the way God mapped things out when he created the world. So, again, Zechariah talks about it. The prophet Zechariah says that Jerusalem will become a cup of trembling for all nations, and that any nation that comes against it will be cut to pieces. Look for the Temple Mount to be more and more at the top of your news headlines in 2023 and the days to come. Exciting times. Stay with us here on the Watchman Newscast as we break down all of these issues for such a time as this right now. Hey, thanks for joining us here today on the live stream. If you missed any of it, the entire live stream will be posted on the channel. Just check it out right under Watchman Newscasts. While you're there, be sure to subscribe and be sure to join us tomorrow, Thursday, January 12th, for more of the Watchman Newscast. Until then, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.